Hey guys, so for today's video, we're going to jump ahead to lesson 17, and lesson 17 is drawing the coordinate plane and points on the coordinate plane. And what you'll notice behind me is I have just drawn a coordinate plane, just a blank one on the sheet of paper. And I want you to do a couple things before we get started today. The first thing I want you to do is find a sheet of paper and recreate your own coordinate plane and take up the whole page just like I have. And I want you to do a couple things for me. I want you to label all the parts to a coordinate plane. So I want you to find the axis and label the axes. I want you to label each quadrant in the correct order. And I want you to show me that you understand what those are and before we move on with 17. So when you get to this point, pause the video and recreate your coordinate plane, label that the axes and each coordinate, and then get in line up front and show me, and then we'll move on. So pause the video now and create and label. Okay, after you have done that and shown me, the next step that I want you to do is to scale your coordinate plane. Again, scaling is figure out what increments you want to go by, and I want you to scale your x and y axes in increments of 5, and go from 0 to 20 on your scale, and just go ahead and make that scale. And you should be scaling both sides, the positive and the negative side of both axes. Okay, so we're going to use the coordinate plane that you created to do a couple of exercises. So hopefully you did it in pencil, so because you're going to be erasing and rewriting those things, and you'll be plotting points to go with each exercise or each example and the exercises today. So when you get done with that step and you've scaled your coordinate plane, move on to example 1. So example 1 says label, what does it say? Okay, locate and label the points and list the points on the above grid. And you should have the grid in there. And yours is kind of scaled. Yours is going to be scaled differently than the one you created, but that's okay. So go ahead and scale those and pause the video now so that you could do that. Frankie's here too. He was just letting you know that he's here. Okay, so after you've done that, I want you to think about the grid that you just created, and I want you to think about a point that's not on that grid. See if you can just think of a point and label that and just tell me about any point that's not on your grid, and then explain why it's not on there. And then the next part, write how you could graph that without changing the size of the grid, without changing the physical size of the grid. So without making the grid lines longer to get that point on there, how could you adjust that grid as it is? Okay, pause me now and do those things. Oh, they don't have this question on there. Okay, I apologize. The last 2 questions I asked were not actually in your book, but that's okay. You can go back and rewatch those parts and do that. We'll do those when we're all done with the lesson. Move on to example 2. Again, draw a coordinate plane using an increased number scale. So the last one you just did was a 1-to-1 scale, where you went up from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The one you created at the beginning was by 5, so you went 5, 10, 15, 20. So create a different scale in order to fit all of those numbers that you need to on there. And it's possible to have an x-axis and a y-axis on different scales, and that's okay. They can be different scales as long as they're scaled properly. And pause me now and complete example 2. Okay, hopefully that went well for you. Example 3, again, recreate your coordinate plane on the grid with an appropriate scale and locate and label the following points. And you'll notice the x points, the first point in your coordinate, are all decimals. So what might that tell you about how you're going to scale that x-axis? You might have to think of a smaller scale. Again, your scale doesn't have to go in whole number increments or integer increments. You can have quarters, halves, etc. You can have increments that are not whole numbers. Okay, pause me now and finish example 3. All right, example 4, once again, recreate your coordinate plane. Determine a scale for x-axis and y-axis. And draw and label all the coordinates. Draw and label the coordinate plane and locate and label the points in your quadrant plane or coordinate plane. Go ahead and pause me now and complete exercise 4. When you have finished exercise 4, example 4, go ahead and go on to the problem set. When you finish the problem set, get in line and show me, and we'll take a look at it. Again, if you have questions, go back and re-listen. I didn't give much instruction on this lesson because I feel like at this point you guys mostly have this down. So hopefully this doesn't take an incredible amount of time, but I expect there to be questions. If you have questions, raise your hand, get in line, and we'll get you figured out. So yeah, good luck. Get to it.